Gordonsville First Baptist, it is such a joy every time we come and worship with you, and particularly when I have an opportunity to share the word of the Lord with you all. This church is very dear to my wife and I. Of course, you raised my wife, you gave me my first opportunity to preach, and we love you all so very much, and I'm very, very grateful for you. We're just wrapping up the Christmas season. And of course, Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year. It's a time to spend with family, to spend with friends, to reflect upon all that the Lord has done for you in the year that has just passed. But while Christmas is the happiest, the most joyful time of the year, it can also be the hardest. For those who have lost loved ones, for those who find that time with family doesn't leave them feeling filled, it leaves them feeling scarred and discouraged. For those who don't know what the next year will have in store and the picture looks gloomy, Christmas can be a very, very hard time of year. It can be the hardest time of year for those who are feeling barren. I don't know if any of you have been to a barren land before. Smith County is not a barren land, just FYI. This land of rolling hills and huge rivers and great big trees with just green everywhere, particularly in the summer. It's so spectacular. And in my home, Zimbabwe, there's some parts of the country that are like this, where there's a lot of green and there are rivers and trees. But there are other parts of the country that are barren. And if you drive towards the border, the South African border, there's a border town called Bike Bridge, and all the country around Bike Bridge for miles and miles and miles is barren land. The only vegetation you see are these small shrubs. There's not a blade of grass because goats have eaten the grass up at the roots. And the shrubs that you see are perfectly trimmed at the bottom, the height of the reach of the tallest goat's mouth. And my heart breaks whenever I drive towards Bike Bridge because I see people walking around forlorn, destitute. It's hard to have hope in a barren land. Yeah. And yet, while Christmas can be the hardest time of year when you're feeling barren, the Christmas story is all about hope for people who are trapped in barrenness. Amen. Because God became man, we can sing even when we are barren. Yeah. And today I'm going to be reading from Isaiah chapter 54. If you would turn with me. Isaiah chapter 54 verses 1 through 10 and then jumping down to verse 17. Sing, O barren one, who did not bear. Break forth into singing and cry aloud, you who have not been in labor. For the children of the desolate one will be more than the children of her who is married, says the Lord. Enlarge the place of your tent, and let the curtains of your habitation be stretched out. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes, for you will spread abroad to the right and to the left. And your offspring will possess the nations, and will people the desolate cities. Fear not, for you will not be ashamed. Be not confounded, for you will not be disgraced. You will forget the shame of your youth, and the reproach of your widowhood you will remember no more. For your Maker is your husband. The Lord of hosts is his name, and the Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. The God of the whole earth he is called. For the Lord has called you, like a wife deserted and grieved in spirit, like the wife of youth when she is cast off, says your God. For a brief moment I deserted you, but with great compassion I will gather you. In overflowing anger for a moment I hid my face from you, but with everlasting love I will have compassion on you, says the Lord, your Redeemer. This is like the days of Noah to me. As I swore that the waters of Noah should no more go over the earth, so I have sworn that I will not be angry with you, and I will not rebuke you. For the mountains may depart, and the hills be removed, but my steadfast love shall not depart from you, and my covenant of peace shall not be removed, says the Lord, who has compassion on you. And the passage closes with this. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their vindication from me, declares the Lord. Lord God, I thank you that your word meets us right where we are at. We do not have to be any better than we actually are. We do not have to be successful or happy or feel like everything in the world is working out for us, for your word to come to us and to give us hope. Your word brings hope to the barren. And I pray, Lord God, that as we open our barren hearts this morning, you would fill it with your truth and your grace, and you would transform us into the image of your glorious Son. In his name I pray. Amen. Sing, O barren one. O barren woman. Perhaps that phrase doesn't impact us now as it should, as it did to the audience that Isaiah wrote this book for. A barren woman had no hope. There was no social security system in that society. The one protection you had in your old age when you were too frail to work was your children. Your children would provide for you. Your children would put the food on the table for you. The barren woman had no security. It was a society in which your children were your glory, particularly for a woman. That is what gave you honor, by having a lot of children. The barren woman had no honor. She had no glory. She was seen as one condemned by God. In a society where polygamy was widely practiced, the husband of a barren woman would be very likely to go off and marry another woman. And if that woman proved to be fertile, he might entirely neglect and reject that barren woman. It was a lonely existence for the barren woman. She was shamed. She had no security. And she was lonely. And then we get into verse 4, and the metaphor changes slowly, and it talks about the shame of her widowhood. A widowed woman is slightly different to a barren woman, because a widowed woman once had a husband, maybe once had children, maybe at one point in her life things were working out for her. Things seemed to be going all right. But those days are long past now. Her husband is dead. She has no one to stand up for her, no one to protect her, no one to look after her. Destitute and alone. But perhaps the most pitiable of all these women spoken of in this passage is the one mentioned in verse 6. The rejected bride. A wife deserted and grieved in spirit, like a wife of youth when she is cast off. The widowed woman had no husband. The rejected woman also has no husband, but she also, on top of that, has something else. She has an enemy. There's a man in that community who has a grievance with her, who's out to get her, who does not want to see her flourish. How pitiable is the state of the rejected bride. And then the passage goes on, and something rather surprising happens. We realize that it is the Lord who has rejected this bride. Verse 7, for a brief moment I deserted you. And you see, perhaps there's some in the room this morning who feel, I'm not really like the barren woman. I'm not really like the widowed woman either, because these two poor ladies are suffering because of no fault of their own. The barren woman couldn't help being barren. The widowed woman couldn't have stopped her husband from dying. But the rejected woman, well, she brought that suffering on her own head. And perhaps you feel that there is no hope from you, because unlike the barren woman and the widowed woman, you too have brought this on your own head. You have hardened your heart. You have turned your back on the Lord. You have willfully gone in the other direction. You have lived a life of sin. You've concealed it from those in your community around you. You come to church and you sing all the songs. You dress nicely. You know all the right words to say. You know how to get people off your back, off your scent. But you know that your heart is darkened. That you have turned your face away from the Lord. That you have gone in the opposite direction. And you just feel in your heart that God is angry with you this morning. You know that He's angry with you. And you know what? You might be right. God might be angry with you this morning. Verse 8 makes it impossible to rule out that possibility. In overflowing anger, for a moment, I hid my face from you. Our sin angers the Lord. He gets angry when we rebel against Him. And yet, even if that is your state this morning, the promises of this passage are here for you. Together, these three types of women paint the perfect picture of destitution, of helplessness, of loneliness, of barrenness. And so, moving forward, I'm going to refer to all these women collectively as the barren one, the barren woman. And it is to a person such as this, in this sort of situation, that the promises of this passage come to, and the commands of this passage come to. Because make no mistake, this passage has commands. Sing, verse 1. Enlarge, verse 2. Fear not, verse 3. And I'm just cherry picking these, there are more. These are not suggestions, these are not little tidbits of advice, these are commands from the Lord. This is what the Lord is demanding of you. And yet perhaps they're not quite how we think typically about what the Lord's commandments are. We tend to think they are something repressive, something to restrain our joy. We're being commanded to be joyful here. Every one of these commands are things that we all want anyway. These are commandments of utter liberation, utter freedom. And yet, they can also be utterly crushing. How can you command a barren woman to sing? I mean, is this not perhaps a little bit insensitive? It almost sounds something like this, like, come on, don't be so gloomy. I mean, look on the bright side. It's not all bad. Yeah, you're a little bit barren, but there's some good things in life. Put a smile on your face. You're making me feel bad about myself. It might sound insensitive. At worst, it could almost sound insulting. Like, ha, you barony. I know you have no reason to sing, but go on, sing! Sing so I can hear you. Sing louder, please. As one commentator put it, it is cruel to ask a barren woman to sing. It is cruel to ask a barren woman to sing unless you are able to offer the only thing that will make her happy. And the Lord knows how impossible it is for the barren woman to start singing. How she needs very good reason to sing in her despair. And so this passage is saturated with reasons. In the first 6 verses of the chapter, you see the word for appearing 7 times, introducing a reason for the command that has just been given. Verse 1, the barren woman can sing for the Lord gives her children. She can enlarge her tent for he promises to cause her to spread out. That's verse 4. Verse 5, she need not fear, for he will remove her disgrace. And then it's almost as if the audience is needing more. Yes, Lord, I know you say you're going to remove my disgrace, but how can you do this? Have you forgotten that I'm barren, that I'm despised? My disgrace is over my head all my days. How can you do this? And so we're bombarded with another flood of reasons in verses 5 and 6. How can the Lord do all these things? Because he has decided to marry this woman, for your maker is your husband. The Lord of hosts is his name. And we know from Genesis that when 2 people get married, they become united with each other in a one flesh bond. And so the Lord is saying, I am coming to unite myself with you. I am coming to be united in your shame, so that you might be united in my glory. And of course, when it refers to your maker here, this is referring to Jesus. God has always existed in a triune state. And yet we only are told about the Trinity in a clear way in the New Testament. But Jesus has always been the second person of the Trinity. And it is Christ who comes and marries his bride. And so this right here is the Christmas story. This is the story of God becoming a man to win his people to himself. And it is only because God came and took on our shame and allowed us to take hold of his glory that we can have any hope in barrenness. It's only if we cling to the gospel and we believe in the depths of our heart that we can sing when every other fragment of hope in the world around us has been stripped from us. My father-in-law visited Josh Dillon in hospital yesterday. I'm sure many of you know him. And he has a cancerous growth on his back that, if not removed, would cause him to be paralyzed for the rest of his days. And when my father-in-law walked in, he had a big smile on his face. Because this is a man whose hope is fixed on the Maker who comes to marry his bride. And he can sing though he is in a state of utter brokenness. In verse 10, it's almost like the Lord directs Isaiah to turn his eyes to that which is most stable, that which is most constant in all creation, to the mountains and the hills themselves. And Isaiah looks at these things and he says, even these things shall depart. Even these things shall be removed. These things are like a mist in comparison to the love that God has for you. Even the most sure, foundational things in all creation cannot be compared to God's faithfulness to those who put their trust in him. And so that is why we have every reason to sing, no matter what situation we find ourselves in. And yet this passage is not just designed to make us happier Christians. It's not just so that me and Jesus are good. I love my little Bible. I love my little Christian community. This is all good. I'm good with God. I know I'm his child. I've got no reason for guilt or shame. And I'm feeling contented. I'm feeling happy. This is not what this passage is about. You'll see in verse 17 as it wraps up, it says, this is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. Now this phrase, servant of the Lord, is used throughout Isaiah. And sometimes it refers to the promised Messiah, sometimes it refers to Israel. But up until this point in Isaiah, it's only ever been used in the singular. Now we get to the final verse of chapter 54, and we see it used in the plural. The servants of the Lord. And it's like this servant figure who's promised to come to redeem Israel. He comes now, and then he transforms people into his likeness. He comes and he makes disciples who make disciples. He is the servant and he makes people into servants. He's the offspring of the woman who's referred to in verse 3. Verse 2 and 3, enlarge the place of your tent, and let the curtains of your habitation be stretched out. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes, for you will spread abroad to the right and to your left, and your offspring, the Messiah, will possess the nations, and will people the desolate cities. And so, this text comes to us, and if we are feeling barren this morning, it tells us to spread out. We might feel like my faith is hanging on by a thread. And so I just have to hunker down, just push forward, stick to me and my family, and try and make it through this storm. But the Bible never gives us that option. It always calls us to go out. The barren woman must prepare for expansion. We need to be going out to public places, to parks, into our workplaces, and praying for people, and speaking the truth and the hope of the gospel to people. We need to be praying for our colleagues at work. Emmy, my wife, started doing that a few months ago. She just started praying with another believer at work for 15 minutes a day for her co-workers. The first day she did that was the first day the Lord brought someone into her office for her to share the gospel with. And ever since then, every week she's had the opportunity to share the gospel with someone new. And it's always a different situation, but the gospel applies to them all and give hope to them all. You all are surrounded by unbelievers every day of your life. Are you believing that the Lord desires to people the desolate places? Are you bringing the hope of the gospel? Are you bringing the kingdom to all those around you? We all have a responsibility to speak the words that can bring hope and truth. And yet, while we all need to be doing that here and now, there's also a burden on all of us as the global church to go out to the people who've never heard the name of Christ. There are 3 billion people in the world today who've never heard of Christ. There is no hope apart from the gospel. There's no hope of redemption, of salvation, if people have never heard of the name of Christ. And there is no plan that Jesus has to bring people to himself apart from the local church. The church is his only plan. And he will take possession of the desolate places. The question is, will he do it with you, or will he do it without you? But we must take the gospel to the nations. And that is why Emmy and I are going to Zimbabwe in March. We want to plant churches that take the gospel to the ends of the earth. And candidly, we feel barren. We feel like the barren woman right now. We are going to a country in complete disarray. The military have been picking off citizens by the dozens this year. Anyone who pops up their head seems to get abducted and goes missing. Right now, it is very hard to see how we will have the finances to live and serve in Zimbabwe. We are 2 20-something-year-olds with a baby on the way. By the way, that's an announcement for you. We don't have all the answers. Sometimes it feels like we don't have any of the answers. We don't know what lies ahead of us in Zimbabwe. These are uncharted waters for us. We're feeling barren, and yet the Lord is calling us out. And so, like the woman in this passage, we know that we must go. We cannot disobey him. He will take possession of the desolate cities. Church, the Lord is calling you. He's calling you to be used to advance his kingdom, to bring hope to this barren land. And we pray. Father God, open our hearts this morning. Help us to see our barrenness. Oh, how we love to cover it. How we love to pretend like everything's okay. Like we're more sanctified than we really are. Like we have it all together. But Lord, we are all broken before you. We have no strength, we have no hope, we have no joy in ourselves. And yet we have every reason for having these things when we turn our eyes to you. And we realize what you have done in becoming a baby. And being united with our shame, taking on our sin on the cross. And promising that if we bind ourselves to you, we will be united in your glory. Cause our hearts to sing, Lord. Cause our hearts to want to move towards the desolate places and not away from it. May we long to see you take possession of the nations. And may we be used in any way that you lead us to do so, to play a role in this grand plan that you have for your people. I pray this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.